Hey everybody, welcome to the Urban Bourbon Hour. For the first time ever, we are featuring a Scotch distillery here on the Urban Bourbon Hour, and just kind of hopping on here a little bit early so that we can make sure that Callum is able to hop on, and if he is, we'll just kind of get started a little request. And let's get him in here. With Callum. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining the Urban Bourbon Hour here tonight. What's going on, my man?
How's it going, man? How are you?
How are you?
Man, great to see you again.
Yes.
The last time that we were in this situation, you were doing a live, and when Aberlour was involved, we were defeated on the Sunday night fight by our good friends, our good Australian friends over there.
That is true, but let the record show that my votes went to Aberlour when you tallied them up.
Look, but I knew that all that cash at Venmo that was going to your account from my account, I knew that it would pay off someday, you know.
Yeah, there was just that one vote that didn't go, and that kind of tipped the way to start. But that was such a fun night and such a cool Sunday night fights to be able to do that. And then probably a lot of people that are tuning in here tonight probably watched that one, and it was a totally unique thing for us, and so cool of you guys to send out all those kits to everyone.
Yeah, no, it was amazing, man. And to be honest, like at the end of the day, you know, I think both of us know this, but at the end of the day, it's just about people enjoying the whiskey, you know.
Absolutely.
Whether people are drinking it out of their Glencairns or not, you know, with ice or without, you know, it is the most of it. Look, listen, I'm not going to force it on you. I'm not going to force it on you, all right? I wouldn't do that. But I've actually got one of these bad boys tonight.
Ooh.
So it's actually got the copita. You know,
yeah,
so
very cool.
I'm a little bit excited because I don't usually go with one of those. But how are things with you anyway? What's going on?
Everything's good.
Chicago, freezing.
Yes, I mean, are you in Chicago right now?
I'm not actually. I'm not. I'm still in the Dominican Republic. So I wish that I could say that I was dressed for the winter, but I've actually got flip flops on. So
that's awesome. I love it.
Keeping it as classy as possible, man. Keeping it as classy as possible.
I love it.
What's
I
it
love
like?
it. Well, let me just. It's not that bad. I mean, it's mid-30s, which is not. It's not bad. I mean, I mean, we can't complain in Chicago so far this year. There's no complaining so far. It's been good. But let me introduce you to everyone that's tuning in, because this is also this is a unique Urban Bourbon Hour, because I've never had anyone on from a Scotch distillery before. So I think this is a cool opportunity to learn more about Aberlour. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about you. So I hope you're ready to do that a little bit.
Well, man, listen, I'm always happy to talk about me. You know how shy I am. You know how
yeah,
shy I
right.
am in front of the camera. You know, so
yeah.
I mean,
so for everyone tuning in, this is Callum O'Donnell. He is a brand specialist for Aberlour Distillery. Obviously, it's a Scotch out of Scotland, a very old distillery. They must be doing something right, because I think the distillery dates back to 1879 or something like that.
Someone did their homework. Someone did their homework, man. You know, no, I mean, it's great that you say that, because I always like to talk, you know, nowadays, especially because everything moves so fast with technology and everything, and you see all these different startups with Scotch, and to be honest, even with a lot of bourbon companies, a lot of bourbon brands, a lot of American whiskies, Irish, Canadian whiskies, I always think of them as slow ups, right? They're phenomenal whiskies that they've just taken their sweet time to get here. And Aberlour is one of those. You know, it's 142 years since it was established, and like I say, that's the opposite of a startup. It's a slow up, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I just became aware of the brand honestly because of you. You know, last summer I got invited to that event here in Chicago. I think it was the summer of 2019, where you did the competition over the design of the box for a special release that was only here in Chicago, which was really cool. And that was like my first encounter with Aberlour and really with Scotch of any kind, other than like, you know, somewhere at a wedding I had a Johnny Walker, you know, black label, you know, late at night one night. So it was really cool to like learn about the different expressions you guys were doing. That day, I really fell in love with one of them very much. And I think it's because I'm, you know, a bourbon drinker, and we'll get to that particular one. But tell us a little bit about like Aberlour's process. I know that in terms of aging, you guys are putting out a few age-stated items, and the way that you're aging those, I think, is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, so to be honest, I always like to start, you know, especially because this is the first Scotch you've had on, you know, just so that everybody's aware. Scotch is obviously any whiskey that's completely produced and matured in Scotland. All right, that's one of the big rules of Scotch. It must it must be matured for a minimum of 3 years in oak barrels, and it can only have 3 ingredients. Right, very very similar to the Irish whiskey rules and things like that as well. But with Aberlour, it comes from this region called Speyside. Now, obviously, if you're a bourbon drinker, if you're someone that loves your bourbon, you are going to be maybe a little bit more inclined to go with the Speyside Scotches. The flavors that I like to talk about are rich, floral, and fruity. Those are the kind of 3 key flavors. And I think when we think about Scotch, everybody thinks Scotch, all Scotch, smells a little bit like a wet dog and tastes like an ashtray. You know, they think they've got this smoky feeling, they've got this smoky idea. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. So you see that there, Speyside single malt Scotch and whiskey. You know, Speyside, the region, one single distillery, malt 100% malted barley. Scotch, that word that we spoke about, and obviously whiskey, Ushkava, you know. Oh, that one's already had a big chunk taken out of it.
That's some damage.
But no, so you know, I think all of those points that you mentioned there about us kind of taking our time. The Alba, it's absolutely beautiful, that bottle, and the color of that one, actually, you know. Can you hold the Abuna and the Alba together? Because this is supposed to be a great thing to talk about.
So
you know,
you can see this one is very like honey color, and look how dark and ruby red that is.
I mean, we just launched the Alba really back in 2019. It's brand new to the United States market as far as whiskey goes. And when you look at those 2 whiskies there, you're really looking at the genetic makeup, if you like, of Aberlour. Because the Abuna is exclusively matured in Oloroso sherry barrels, but the Alba is exclusively matured in ex-American barrels or ex-bourbon barrels, right? So those are the 2 kind of secret ingredients, or the secret idea behind Aberlour, and it's that double cask maturation that happens in the age statements. So I mean, it's pretty special, man. And honestly, like, when I remember my first, you were saying about your first time tasting Aberlour, right? And my first time, I never thought that my life would bring me to the point that I would be working for the brand. You know, I would get the privilege, the honor, I suppose you could say, of being able to sell the idea, sell the dream of whiskey, of Aberlour whiskey to people. So it's crazy how things work out. But I remember that event in the herbarium up the stairs, right, with the Chicago, the Chicago Design Museum, Design Museum. So it was that was an amazing thing, and I'm glad that our paths crossed, because it's obviously been a good journey for you, especially someone that's a bourbon lover. To kind of move into the Scotch world is fun, right?
Absolutely, and you touched on this a bit when you were explaining like the Speyside Scotches, and I think there's 5 different regions in Scotland that are considered like Scotch producing regions. It's all different parts of the country, and there's sort of, I don't know that much about it, but there is somewhat of a signature sort of profile between the regions.
Yeah, there was definitely back in the day, we'll say in the early 2000s, this idea surfaced of that all of the different regions of Scotch would give a different flavour to the bottle, or would give a different flavour to the liquid, to the whiskey. And the idea was that it was the terroir, and for example, if you mature a whiskey out on the islands of Scotland, then you're going to get that salty sea air coming through. However, nowadays, as Scotch has kind of opened its wings up to new ideas and kind of push the boundaries, nowadays you can find a little bit of those flavors no matter where it is in the regions, and some people say that there's 5 regions, some people say that there's 6. It depends on who you speak to. But honestly, the main 2 that people are going to know about and talk about are going to be that one that we mentioned already, Speyside, which is rich floral fruity flavor. And then the other region that's the polar opposite, if you like, which is the region of Islay, or the islands of Scotland, where you're going to get that kind of, what we say is peaty, right? But that's that smoky flavour, that lovely, deep, intense smoke flavour that you get on a lot of these peatier Scotches. I did see Alyssa popped her head in, and Key in the Lake as well, so I'll say hello to them.
You guys. Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing. It's just like I guess anywhere here, if you're going to equate it to bourbon, it depends on, who's making it, what style they're going for. I suppose you could find a peated Scotch in Speyside or the Highlands or whatever it may be.
100%. 100%. Yeah. If you look at, for example, if you look at the Glenlivet, that's a Speyside whiskey, right? And the Glenlivet actually has one of their whiskies called the Nadura, which means natural or nature, if you like. And the Nadura has a smoky flavour to it, right? Now, with Aberlour, you won't ever find that. None of the whiskies that we've done that are permanent additions to the range. So, we've seen them all before, but the 12, 16, the 18, the 2 Abunas, the Abuna and the Abuna Alba, and also the Cascanam, none of those are going to be smoky. And it's just because we don't use peat to dry the barley. Once the barley is malted, okay?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, to be honest, I think there's definitely this misconception that all Scotch is smoky.
Big time.
And you'll see that a lot, especially in the US, especially with, when you meet people in tastings or in bars or whatever it is, post or pre-pandemic, people are like, oh no, I'm not a big Scotch drinker, I don't like the smoky flavour.
Yeah.
But, about 90% of the Scotch that's produced and sold isn't smoky. Right, but it's just that 10% has, if you like, they've tarred the rest of us with the same brush.
I hear that. That's why, for me, like Aberlour, I think I've said this before on posts and in my stories. I feel like this is a brand that really appeals to the American whiskey drinker, someone who is used to bourbon, is used to drinking rye. Is maybe looking to branch out. And I'm not saying this, I don't want to say this in a bad way, but like this is a whiskey to start your journey into Scotch. And that's not like saying this is a starter whiskey at all. I'm saying this is just more of a profile that I think if someone wanted to start exploring Scotch, and I'm speaking, from my personal experience, like I have now started to try some other things, in the world of Scotch because of Aberlour. But this is like a good way, I think, to introduce yourself into Scotch whiskey. This
is a gateway Scotch.
Yeah, but I don't mean that in like a bad way at all.
I think you're totally right. One of the beauties of Aberlour, right, and this is something that I come back to time and time again. And hello to everybody that's jumped in. I saw Sam as well. Sam Green jumped in there. And Key in the Lake, the co-producer said that I look a little bit sunburnt. That is definitely true. Definitely true. I'll get the aloe vera on it tonight. Too much Scotch and too much sun, guys. That'll do it to you. But no, I really do think that it's a gateway Scotch, right? Especially for someone who's into rye, who's into bourbon. The Aberlour 12-year-old, right, is one of those whiskies that it really comes forward quite strongly on the bourbon side of things. You get the honey, a lovely vanilla flavor. You might even get it's almost like you get a kind of syrupy vanilla flavor to it, and it's quite light. as well, you know, on the palate. Whereas you look at some of the Scotch, the other Scotches or the other expressions, if you like, in the Aberlour range, and they're going to have a lot more viscosity to them. They're going to have a lot more mouthfeel to them. And as I was saying, one of the things that I love about Aberlour as a range is that you do get that entry kind of idea. It's accessible, it's easy to drink, it's tasty, do you know what I mean? It's very, very light on your palate. But then there's also nuance as you move up the range, you know? And it's like you go on a little adventure. You know, you start off and you get the light vanilla honey flavor, and then as you move up, you start to get these dark fruit flavors, the figs, the dates, the raisins. You might even get some, you know, some caramel flavor, some chocolate flavor, you know? So that's the beauty of it, man. And I suppose that's the beauty of whiskey in general.
Well, with all of that talk about what it tastes like, maybe we should taste a little bit here.
If we have to.
I mean, twist my arm. So you want to start with the 12?
Yeah, let's start off with the 12. And, you know, obviously, I know that we were doing this, you know, to talk a little bit about Burns Night as well.
Yes.
We will get onto that.
Yeah, we'll absolutely get to that.
Yeah. That's one of those things that, you know, we can definitely chat a little bit about as well. But this is going to be the first one that anyone that's going to our Burns Night tomorrow night will be treated to this one. So the Aberlour 12, obviously when we have an age statement on Scotch, that's the minimum age that this Scotch is spent in the barrel.
Yeah.
So think back to what you were doing 12 years ago, Chris, right? And I know that you look like you're 25. I know that you look like you're 25, but you're actually 30.
All right, I'll go with it.
So essentially, think back to what you were doing 12 years ago. And that was when this whiskey was laid to rest in oak barrels, right? Now, the two types of barrel that we use, we mentioned it briefly when you held up the two, the Abuna and the Alba. These two different barrel types that we're using are ex-bourbon barrels and Oloroso sherry barrels. Keenan Lake's asking me when Alan Clark's making an appearance. I wish, man. I wish. But he's over the other side of the pond for the moment. He's probably in his bed as well. Although that's never stopped him before, to be fair. So essentially, those two different barrels, the ex-bourbon and the Oloroso sherry, each one of those is going to give you a different flavour to the whiskey. Basically, with the ex-bourbon barrel, what you're looking at is a lot of honey vanilla flavour. We talked about that already. And that's the first initial spot that you're going to get with the Aberlour 12. You get a little bit of spice on the nose, maybe. I've actually got some here. Get a little bit of spice on the nose. It's quite sweet, quite light.
Very, yeah. And you had mentioned that apple kind of note before, and for me, this 12 is like red apples and very fruity, and there is like that, just like a tinge of some spice back there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the orchard fruit idea is something that really comes through a lot with Scotch, right? Especially Speyside Scotches. So you will get a lot of that orchard fruit. You might get some apple. You might get some pear as well. That's definitely something that I get a lot of. I get a lot of the pear flavor. But essentially on the back end, to talk a little bit about that spice, that's that little tinge, if you like, of the Oloroso sherry barrel coming through. That little twist of spice at the end. That's kind of what makes the Aberlour 12 a little bit interesting, you know, because this is one that on your first couple of attempts, your first couple of sips, you might get this kind of, like we said, the honey vanilla, you might get some apple, some pear. But as you move up it, as you keep going, keep trying it, you might get something else. And it might be that spice, that kind of Oloroso sherry spice on the back end.
Yeah. And it is, Slancha, it is, you know, you get the fruitiness, you get even like a kind of like a chocolatey sort of note on this on the back end, and then that you get that nice little punch of spice kind of along the back of your tongue and like the back sides of your tongue that just makes this such a great like experience to drink this. And we talked about this on Sunday Night Fights. As this sits in the glass too, this whiskey really develops a lot of different things start happening with this, and the finish kind of starts, you know, warm and sweet and gets a little spicy there on the back end.
Yeah.
And it's just a fun whiskey to drink.
I think that as well, that anybody that's out there that's drinking along with us, if anybody's having a little bit of a dram, a wee nip of whiskey along with us. I think that's a great thing in general, to let your whiskey sit. You know, we obviously Key in the Lake's on, and whenever I'm on Key in the Lake with Jake and the team, I'm always amazed at how whiskey changes so much, even over a 5-minute period. And the Aberlour 12 really does that, right? The Aberlour 12 really does that. So with Aberlour, you know, I think it's always good to come back after 5 minutes and give it another go. Leave it open in the glass, you know, leave it sitting there for 5 minutes and just let the whiskey breathe, I suppose you could say. And just let some of that alcohol vapor come off of it. And you get into the kind of the nitty gritty of the other flavors, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And for everyone joining, I'm just going to kind of reintroduce Callum here. Thanks everyone for hopping on here. It's the Urban Bourbon Hour featuring our very first Scotch with Callum O'Donnell, who is brand specialist for Aberlour Distillery. So we're talking about Aberlour. We just tasted the 12-year age-stated Scotch. Finished double cask matured, so in Oloroso sherry and ex-bourbon casks. And then those are those matured separately, then blended together?
Yeah, so you actually you had a wee slip there, and when you said finished, and that's a great thing, right?
Yes.
You know, I think people really get caught up in this finishing thing, especially with Scotch, right? You know, if you're talking about 12 years, 16 years, what happens in a lot of other Scotches is that they'll spend 14 years in one type of barrel. It might be a sherry barrel, it might be an ex-American barrel, it could be a cognac cask, whatever it is. And then they'll finish the whiskey, aka they'll take the whiskey out of that barrel and put it into another different type of barrel to finish it. And it gives it that kind of little flick of flavor at the end. Aberlour, we don't do that.
Yes.
Aberlour, we mature the whiskey separately, like you said, for the full age statement in the two different types of barrels. So you've got this ex-bourbon barrel, obviously, and it's got 12 years in there, and then the ex-Oloroso sherry barrel, 12 years in there. And what that'll do is that, and like you said at the end, we blend the two together. And in Scotland, we like to call it or marrying the whiskies together, right? And now, while that might limit us as far as stock goes in the long run, it also gives us more ability to play with more flavour, right? You know, unfortunately, the whiskey isn't unlimited. If only if it was. Although yeah. I'm sure if it was, then Key in the Lake would have been a lot more interesting when I'm on board. But essentially, you know, it gives us more room to play with flavour, which is one of the beauties of Aberlour, and I think that's one of the reasons that we do have so much versatility when we talk about the expressions. And while we don't have any smokier whiskies, you will find an absolute myriad of flavours there. You know, you're going to have a huge flavour map on all of these whiskies.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for pointing that out. So a lot of times when someone's talking about American whiskey, you know, the finishing is a huge thing in American whiskey right now. It's almost getting a little out of control, in my opinion. Yeah. So yes, these are not finished whiskeys. These are matured in these barrels. So yes, I totally stumbled on that because I'm so used to talking about finished whiskey. But it's a great point. These are matured that entire time in those X barrels and then married together, which is so cool.
Hello?
Did you lose me?
Hello. Have I lost you?
No, I'm here. I got you.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go on.
No, we're good. Looks like you're kind of breaking up just a touch, but we got you, I think.
Go ahead.
So do you want to move on to the 16?
Yeah, let's go ahead. So this one, this one is special to me. It's personally this is my favorite as far as we talk about, like, you know, a lot of people in the whiskey business, we talk about your everyday sipper, right? The one that, you know, the one that you just come back to over and over and over again. And this one is just, when we talked a little bit before about maturing in those two different barrel types, this is the one that's got the most balance between the two. You're going to get those lovely flavours from the ex-bourbon, but then now we're really going to see that ex-Oloroso sherry flavour come to the fore, right? In the sense of much more dark fruit, much more of a kind of, you're going to get, I like to say, luxurious, longer flavours, right? That sweetness comes in. There's a little bit more intensity to it. And I see that a lookup over down there in the comments is asking about price points. It'll really depend on where you are in the United States. Obviously, state to state will change. But for example, where Chris is at the moment in Chicago, you'll find it for anywhere around about between $50 for the 12-year-old, around there. And you'll find the 16 for about 75 or 80.
Yeah.
But this 16, man, you know, it's a really, really special whiskey. I actually like a couple of droplets of water in mine.
Okay.
16, just to kind of open up the flavor. I mean, sometimes you can leave it to open up with the air and with the, you know, just with the oxygen. But I had a couple of drops of water to this one.
All right, so I'm going to try it first, and I'm going to add a couple drops and check it out. So you're right. Like you can tell right away on the 16, like the nose is much more intense in those darker fruit notes. And
you might get a little bit more of that bacon spice flavor as well.
Yes.
You know, that aroma, that spice aroma comes through a lot more on the 16, I think, than the 12. My girlfriend always burns incense, right? She loves to burn a bit of incense. You know, puts her in the yoga vibe and all that kind of thing. And I always get that kind of that almost incense aroma on this one. You know, that kind of spice.
Yes.
Burnt spice, you know, it's almost a toasted spice aroma.
I can totally see that. And then on the palate, again, it kind of moves into like it's almost like a fig sort of flavor. I don't want to say raisin, but a lot kind of along that line. And then
that
like
dark fruit flavor. That dark fruit flavor, figs, and I think raisin is it. Some people say to me raisin, you know, but I get a lot of kind of not so much sweetness, but just that balance from that darker fruit flavor.
Yes,
there is still the hint of, you know, that vanilla on the front end, but I think, like I said before, it's got this much longer, luxurious flavor there. I'm also just going to jump in and answer a couple of questions here. That's a great question from homebar.io. Is the ratio the same between the 12 and the 16? I think that's an incredible question. And that's actually something that comes up a lot in the tastings, because people say, so is the only difference here really the extra aging? So the extra 4 years, or if it's the 18, the extra 6 years versus the 12.
Yeah.
And the ratios are actually different. As you move up Aberlour as a whiskey, as you move up the range, you get more and more and more of that of proportion of the Oloroso sherry barrel, right? And so the ratio is going to be a little bit higher on the Oloroso sherry side. And that's actually something that I think you'll see there in tasting the 16 alone, you know.
Yeah.
You do get the extra 4 years. You're going to get a little bit more of that oak, that kind of toasted oak flavor. But essentially, the big flavors that come through to the fore here are those extra flavors, the dark fruit flavors, the raisins, the dates, the figs, you know.
For sure. I totally agree with that. And the finish, you do get like, you get a little bit more of an oak presence on the finish, kind of like lingers there on your tongue, and then kind of like a bright spice to it on the finish too. Really, really nice. And again, like such a fun whiskey to drink. And I just added a couple of drops of water to this. I want to see kind of what that does.
Yeah, so I've actually got some water here. Let me just add a little bit of this to it. But essentially, one of the things as well that I always like to do with this one, and this is going to sound a little bit crazy, but I really like this in a cocktail.
Oh,
this
that sounds awesome.
Is marvelous. It's really got that balance to it, and when you put it into a cocktail, it's really, really special. So I'm a whiskey sour guy. I've always been, and I like this and the Abuna in a whiskey sour because the whiskey really comes through. But I once tried a Blood and Sand with Aberlour 16, which is the, you know, cocktail inspired by the 1911 film and so on. And it was just the balance, the citrus flavors of the 16 coming through on the front end, and you get that dark fruit flavor, and it just went really, really well with the Blood and Sand, you know. So that's definitely something that I recommend. I know you're not a massive cocktail guy.
No, I've been getting more into cocktails.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it's a good experiment. I see that Mr. Steve Glake's just joined himself as well. He will know a thing about good cocktails as well. That guy over there.
Very nice.
But yeah, man, I think it's definitely something that when you start your journey of whiskey, you're always going to get a little bit like you're going to get overcome at the beginning with trying neat flavors and all that kind of thing. But for me, I definitely, as soon as I got to the United States, I definitely saw more of that aspect of the cocktail side of things and how versatile a whiskey like Aberlour can be, if you're adding it to a cocktail,
Oh man, the flavors in this would just kill in a lot of different cocktails.
Yeah. Did you really see a difference with the water? Just a couple of drops of water, right?
So with the water, I just did like 4 small drops of water in it. And now I get I feel like kind of like a citrus peel kind of comes forward on the palate for me.
Yeah.
So there was like a citrusy note there, but I feel like the water kind of opened up that note a little bit more for me.
No, 100%. And water is the whiskey. Water is the whiskey. What oxygen is to wine, right? It really does open up the flavor. And there's Key in the Lake coming through with the Aberlour 16 in a sour. We once upon a time, back when this was possible, we were sat my first ever Key in the Lake podcast actually, and it was just after we did the whiskey that you talked about, the Aberlour 15-year-old, with the Design Museum of Chicago, and we were in Travail with Jake and Wilson, and they gave us whiskey sours with the Aberlour 16, and man, that was a glorious day. I remember it like it was yesterday because we were sat there in Travail looking at the Chicago River, right, having a little bit of tapas, and then an Aberlour 16 sour to go along with it, man. So
in the summertime, that sounds fantastic.
I think it was late. It was kind of late summer, early. Or moving into the winter, unfortunately. The famous winter of Chicago.
So the 16 is just really a wonderful pour, and I like that you mentioned that adding the water to it, because that really was nice how it kind of brought forward that citrusy note for me. So really, really cool. You want to move on to the Alba and then kind of talk as we drink the Alba and the Abunda. Kind of let's do the Alba, and let's talk a little bit about this big event that Aberlour is putting on. I think it's across the country. Yes.
Yeah, so it's a nationwide event, United States wide, and we're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing this Burns Supper, it's called. Now, Robbie Burns was a really, really famous poet. He's Scotland's national poet. Every single year, there's oh man, look at that creative! It looks fantastic. I mean, basically, people don't realize that they know Burns. But for example, Auld Lang Syne is a Burns. Is work of Robert Burns. People like Maya Angelou, they all kind of consider him to be a real inspiration. That they say that Abraham Lincoln actually kicked about with a poetry book in his pocket of Robert Burns' poems. So essentially, it's a really good opportunity for us to celebrate Burns, but also to have a few drams and to really enjoy ourselves. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to be doing that tomorrow night, and I hope you're ready. Have you ever been to a Burns Supper?
Yes, so I was at the one last January when we could actually still get together. So I got to experience it live in person and the whole experience, and it was really amazing. I mean, for people that just to describe the event, they have traditional music, they recite poems by Robert Burns. We sit down for just a wonderful dinner that's pairing, Scottish food with the Aberlour, and it's really one of those events that kind of like changes you. You don't realize like how important this guy was. He lived a very short life. He only lived for 37 years, but the impact that he had, you mentioned it, on so many people, so many hundreds of years later, because of his poetry and dedication to writing and even going around Scotland and sort of as a historian and preserving some of like the old Scottish folk songs that were alive with the people, but not really ever maybe written down and published somewhere. And he kind of went about, this is my understanding, kind of went about kind of taking bits and pieces of those folk songs and making sure that they were preserved. And that was like Old Lang Syne. I think this was alive with the people of Scotland. This is actually a printout of it that you guys sent. And he I think expanded upon maybe what he had taken from, you know, his travels and heard. And this song is like, everyone knows this song. Every New Year's Eve, this is sung everywhere in the world. I mean,
insane. You know, so Andy, who did the poetry and everything last year, our brand lead, you know, phenomenal speaker, and he knows so many of Burns' works by heart. You know, he tells a great story about Auld Lang Syne. That he was once in Cambodia, and he was on the back of a motorbike in Cambodia, and the driver, his ringtone on his phone was Auld Lang Syne.
Oh my gosh.
And you know, the thing is though, this is the thing about Robert Burns, is that you don't realize how far that reaches, right? Yep. And this is a guy, like you said, he was born penniless, and unfortunately he died at 37 penniless, right? But if he could see how far his work has reached, you know, how his influence, the stories that he wrote, or the stories that he spun through his poetry and his letters, it's absolutely incredible, you know. So tomorrow obviously is going to be a little bit of a different one. This is the first time we've ever done a virtual one, right? So yeah, it's quite exciting, and we had a rehearsal tonight, and I can only say that it is going to be unlike any virtual event that you've ever seen before. There's so much more to this one, and you might be, I mean, you'll probably be disappointed because I'm a terrible writer, but I pieced together a little poem for tomorrow night. So if you're really, I mean, if that doesn't get people coming in to laugh at me, then nothing will. You know, absolutely nothing will.
Well, but, can we get a preview of it tonight? Can we get a preview of it tonight?
We could, but I don't want to ruin it. But
I'm just kidding.
It's called the Toast to the Lassies. And every Burns supper, there's a toast to the lassies, which is essentially a man stands up to give homage to the incredible women of his life. And I'm actually going to speak a little bit about other women that have inspired me, you know, and it's a short poem. So hopefully I don't disappoint you. I would hate to disappoint you, Chris, but I mean, who knows? We'll see what happens, man.
No, I can't wait. But I mean, you mentioned the you know, the reciting of the poetry. It is, like I said, it's really moving. It really makes you think about how important, the impact that Burns had on people. And I read something, I think it's even in this book, that it said that the celebration of Robert Burns' birthday is basically like the second most celebrated birthday in the history of mankind, behind Jesus Christ, basically, because of all of these dinners that happen, not just here, but around the world. Like Burns Night is a huge thing every year on his birthday. And it's fascinating to think about, you know, that this guy who died in 1790 something is still in 2021.
I think it was 1796.
Yeah, 1796. Don't quote me on that.
Don't quote me on that.
No, it is. I have it written down, but I can't. Yeah, July 21st, 1796.
Yeah.
So all these hundreds of years later, you know, having this celebration of his life and his work is pretty astonishing, really. It's really cool.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny you say that the emotional side of things. It's very, very moving. It's the music that goes along with the poems, and the writing is very, very poignant. You know, when Andy does the performance tomorrow, we've got an amazing band coming in and everything. There are certain phrases that come to me I've never studied Burns. I looked at, you know, the odd Burns poem when I was at school, obviously, but I never learned any of his poems. But now, just through osmosis almost, right?
Yeah.
You know, I've picked up all these different lines, and I can finish a lot of the poems, you know, I can start them and I can finish a lot of the lines there. A man's a man for all that, you know, that's one of them. You know, my love is like a red, red rose.
Oh yeah.
Obviously super famous, the address to the haggis, which you'll remember from last year.
Yes.
You know, it's a great event, man, and I'm super excited because despite everything that's happened since our last Burn Supper in Chicago last year, despite that 12 months of chaos, basically, that we've had, or 10 months of chaos since, I suppose, it's exciting to be able to push this event, you know, and be able to do this and give something to people that'll be a lot of fun. And I know that they sent you the kit and everything as well, so there's other little bits and pieces in there. So it's exciting. It's exciting.
It's very cool. And I was just messing around, kind of looking up different things about Robert Burns today, and I came across a website that I think is really cool that people could check out, because reading his poetry might be a little bit difficult because, you know, it's not in modern English, obviously.
Yeah, Scots. It's in Scots.
It's in Scotch. And so, like, I was reading through this book that you guys sent along with that kit, and like, you can get a gist of some of the poems from reading them, but some of the stuff just doesn't register. But there was a great website that I found that like translates all of his poems from his original writings to like modern standard English. And it's really, I know that probably doesn't do his poems justice, but it gives you an idea of what he was saying, and then you can go back and read, you know, the standard, you know, how he wrote it, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, so tomorrow night we're actually going to do a couple of polls or a couple of quizzes on different phrases, different Scots phrases. Okay, but you know, for example, tomorrow night we're going to talk about haste you back, which means, you know, come back soon. Lang may your lum reek, which is essentially, it translates to long may your chimney smoke, but it means basically may you live long.
Yes.
May you live long and happy, right? May you live long and prosper, I suppose you could say. You know, oh, wrong hand sign. Yeah. I went for the rocker. I should have went for the live long and prosper. But you know, so it's super exciting, man, and I'm so glad. You know, I don't want to give away too much, you know. But
no.
That there's going to be hundreds of people on tomorrow night on the Zoom. And
it's going to be great.
It's just going to be super special to hear the poetry. Like I said, please give me some kind of pity applause, even, you know, for my poem. But so a wee bit nervous for that. And Keenan Lakeson, he's going to give me some chimney smoke, which sounds quite exciting, really. I can't wait for that.
That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I know, especially out there. But it looks like you're about to get stuck into your Alba, shall we? Yeah,
so let's talk about the Alba. I think the Burns thing is such a cool thing that you guys do to honor, you know, such an important person, an icon of Scotland, and to keep that, you know, to keep that tradition going, and for Aberlour to actually sponsor and create these events is, I mean, that's super cool when a brand, a distillery does stuff like that and keeps the culture of their you know, home alive. I think it's super cool.
Yeah, I think that is part of the beauty of it, right? I mean, I think all of us that love whiskey, we don't just love whiskey. We love the stories and the traditions behind it, right? And Burns he loved whiskey as well. You know, one of his very, very famous quotes is, "Whiskey and freedom gang together," which basically means that whiskey and freedom go hand in hand. They go together, right? And there's another one as well, that Ushkava will face the devil, you know? So Ushkava obviously being the Scots Gaelic for water of life or whiskey, right? So, you know, they just, I suppose he said whiskey and freedom gang together, but Burns and whiskey gang together as well. You know, they go so well. And it brings all of these different aspects of Scottish culture to the fore. You know, you got the pipes, you got the haggis, you got the phenomenal language, the beautiful poetry, and the beautiful music of Robbie Burns. So, Man, it's going to be amazing. I have very, very high hopes for tomorrow night. I know that we've all got Zoom fatigue, we've all got Instagram fatigue, we've all got live video fatigue, but tomorrow night it's going to be super special. It's going to be really, really
I agree. I'm looking forward to it. So thanks for the invite to that, of course. And let's talk about the Abuna Alba.
Yeah, so this is the Abuna Alba. This is essentially our newest permanent expression to the range. And essentially what we can do is, with this one, is we can really taste the difference between this one and obviously the Abuna, right? So the Abuna Alba, it's exclusively matured in ex-bourbon barrels. So you're going to get these lovely spice flavors, the vanilla, the honey. And I think with this one, that I particularly like is that it really brings you closer to that bourbon flavor that a lot of people fall in love with. And one of the cool things about the Abuna Alba is that it's cask strength. Okay, so the previous two whiskies that we drank were at 40% or 80 proof.
Yeah.
This one, I don't know what particular batch number you've got, but it's
this is batch 1. This is batch 1.
Is that 58.1?
114.2. 114.2. Yep, 57.1.
Yeah, so 57.1%, 114.2 proof. Yeah, you know this. It's really going to blow your socks off, right? It's really going to drag you in with that big hitting flavor, and that's the beauty of this one, I think, and it really, really appeals to someone that is more into their bourbon. And you can just, even by the color, even by the color compared to the other two, it's just got this lovely kind of light gold, amber kind of light gold color to it. And on the nose, obviously, the higher proof, it's definitely going to give you a little bit of a shock compared to the other two, but you're going to get a lot more of that kind of butterscotch spice. The oak, the toasted oak as well is going to come through there.
Yeah, this is, I totally get like a toasted marshmallow.
Yeah.
You get very like sweet honey, vanilla.
The proof is so much different as well, You're talking about an extra 40 proof on the other two, or 34.2, I suppose, on the other two. And it really kind of, this is why I love cask strength whiskey, right? It's just so much more of an intensity of flavor.
Yes.
It has that beautiful mouthfeel to it. It's a non-chill filtered whiskey, so you will get a little bit more of that viscosity on it. And it has so much more, it's a little bit more dynamic, if you like, than a typical 80 proof,
Yeah, it's bright, it's punchy, you get that the heat kind of comes through, but it's not like, there's no ethanol, like it's not like an off-putting, like, oh, I'm getting slammed with just overwhelming alcohol. It's not like that at all. It's very well integrated into the whiskey, for sure.
Yeah. I think that one of the things with cask strength whiskies is that you sometimes you have a cask strength whiskey and you realize that you lose a lot of the flavor, right? And it's all to alcohol.
Yes.
One of the great things with both the Abuna and the Abuna Alba is that you keep the flavor, but you've got that intensity of the proof, right, on it as well. One of the things that I love about this one is I get like a kind of candied apples on the kind of the back end. Sláinte, by the way, thanks for having me on. It's been great.
Sláinte, yeah. Thanks for coming on. This has been great to talk about these, and hopefully to expose, some other people to Aberlour and getting into Scotch. This one is just, it's so good. And this is the one that I was talking about when we started off the conversation. This hooked me on Aberlour. And of course, this is very much going to appeal to someone like me who drinks bourbon, who drinks American whiskey, who drinks rye, aged only in ex-bourbon casks. You definitely get that influence of the bourbon into this, with those sweet, like honey, vanilla flavors. There's even kind of like a nuttiness that comes through. I feel
definitely. There's you get maybe kind of an almond note there as well. I think one of the, you mentioned it there, that the ex-bourbon barrels, and that's actually where that's where the whiskey itself gets its name from. Alba comes from the Quercus alba, meaning white American oak, right? Or white oak, if you like.
Yeah.
And Alba, funnily enough, also means Scotland in Gaelic.
Yes, that's right.
A bit of a double entendre there. We lucked out on that one, I think.
So is this one only US release?
So when we originally launched it, it was a United States exclusive, but it exploded. You know, people were crazy about it. So it ended up being, I think now that they're going to start rolling it out across the world, I think they might have launched it in our good friend Star Wars home country. I think it's launched in Australia as well. So, but it's a super great whiskey, man, and it's one of those ones that I don't want to say it always restores my faith in cask strength Scotch, because there's definitely a thing with cask strength Scotch. People aren't as into it as they are with cask strength bourbon, but this one definitely restores my faith, if you like. And I think anyone out there that is a bourbon drinker, anyone out there that loves those honey, vanilla, that toasted marshmallow, like we talked about, that flavor coming through and coming in strong, coming in intense.
Yeah,
this is the one for them. You know, this is the one for them.
This is such a good whiskey, and like I said, that alcohol is so well integrated. Like, yeah, if you're not used to the higher proof whiskey, this one might, you know, bite you a little bit. But if you're used to drinking some higher proof things in the 100 proof range, a little bit higher than that, this will just blow you away. This is such a good whiskey for a bourbon drinker to get into Scotch. With that being said, we need to try this because I've never tried this one before, and I'm super excited about this one. So
this is the big one. This is
the big one.
So this is the one that I suppose that Aberlour gained this cult following, right? People fell in love with this brand. Now the Abuna, I didn't mention it with the Abuna Alba because I wanted to save it for this, but the Abuna was look at that. Look at the color of that whiskey, though. It is
just ruby red.
I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful whiskey. And what I love about these two, both of them together, is that when they're on the shelf of a bar, the contrast is so stark. You know, the contrast is so stark, and you're talking about those two bottles. You're actually talking about the genetic makeup, if you like, of Aberlour, right? The bourbon and the sherry. Right, the ex-bourbon barrels and the all also sherry barrels, and that's the colour that kind of gets given over to the whiskey. The flavours there as well, but no, this stuff, man. So the Abuna was launched in 1997, and the idea behind it was that it was going to be an homage to what whiskey was like in the 1800s. Behind that, actually, what whiskey was like for people in Scotland back in the 1800s. It's small batch, it's non-chill filtered, and it's cask strength, right? And they used one specific type of barrel. Obviously, in this case, it's the Oloroso sherry. So the real flavors here, you're going to get that spice. You might even get a leathery note on the nose, but then you're going to get dark fruit explosion, right? Now we're going to talk raisins. We're going to talk candied apples. We're going to talk cherries. Maybe even, I always think about, you know, you get those little sweets in the US, the chocolate-covered cherries. That's like the main flavour that I get here with a little drop of water in the Abuna. That's the main flavour that I'm getting. But this one is the cult favourite, man. The cult favourite. You know, 24 years now it's been in the market.
This is...
you know, especially, I love because you're going to get such a bourbon barrel, the Abuna Alba, to the Aberlour Abuna, right? The contrast is just going to be so big, especially on the aromas and the flavour, right? You know, let's get stuck in Sláinte.
This Sláinte, this one is so rich.
That real kind of almost a viscosity to it, right? It's oily. It's got that long, luxurious flavour to it. I mean, this is the one. This was the first one that I ever tried. This was the first Aberlour I ever tried, and it changed my life, man. I was sitting in a little house in Speyside, actually, in Scotland, and I was a stone's throw away from Aberlour Distillery, which, funnily enough, was actually founded in 1796 when Rabbie Burns died, and it's the oldest continuously running distillery in Scotland. So I felt like I was in the Scotch mood, you know. And a friend of mine gave it to me to try, and it blew me away, man. You know, absolutely blew me away. We'd spent 6 weeks trying different whiskies, Glenlivet. We tried a bunch of the blends like Chivas Regal and Ballantines. But I'd never tried anything like this until that moment, you know? That kind of crisp, shocking flavour at the start, that spice explosion, and the dark fruit flavours that come at the end of it all. You know, it's such a great experience of a whiskey.
I mean, you're watching me try this for the first time, and I'm like in the process of being blown away. You are so dead on with that chocolate covered cherry and like the syrup that's surrounding the cherry inside the chocolate. It is so rich and decadent, and the mouthfeel is like it's like on the roof of my mouth, it's on my cheeks. I mean, it's everywhere. Wow, this is phenomenal. And this is 123 proof.
123 proof, yeah. That'll definitely do the that'll do the trick. Key in the Lake saying, "Come down the single malt home with us, Chris." You know, obviously the Abuna just in September, it was named the world's best whiskey on Forbes.com. A guy called Brad Jaffe wrote about it.
Yep.
Scored 99 points out of 100, and a lot of people ask me about that part. You know, DJ Poche said in Spanish that "le debe estar quemando la boca." That basically means it must be burning your mouth.
Not me.
But, you know, it's funny because he's just said that, and the proofs in the pour has just said it doesn't drink like 120, and that's so true, right? That lovely kind of that sweetness almost of the Oloroso sherry, and I think, you know, man, it's funny that you said that syrupy note around the cherry of the chocolate covered cherries.
Yes.
There was a young woman recently in one of my tastings said that one of the amazing things about the Abuna is that you just try a little bit, but it fills your mouth with aroma. You know, it feels like you've tasted a lot of it, right? It feels like you've had a really big gulp, but you've only got a small amount in you, and it's just that fullness of flavour and that complete kind of well-bodied roundedness almost of it. It's such an impressive whiskey, man.
So the proof is in the pour. Said Abuna is without a doubt one of the best whiskeys out there, regardless of category. It's delicious. And tasting this for the first time, I will without a doubt say this is up there with pretty much anything. I mean, and if you're an enthusiast like I am, and you like to get into stuff that, you know, is straight out of the barrel, that the distillery, you know, said, hey, we think that this straight out of the barrel is a great representation of the whiskey, and you get to taste that. This is really an amazing whiskey. This is one of those whiskeys that like makes me like sit up and are like, holy shit, what did I just drink?
Man,
I'm serious. Crazy. It's that good.
It's so crazy because, you know, the only other whiskey that scored 99 points out of 100 in the IWSC, that same competition that the Aberlour Abuna scored 99 points on, was a $12,500 bottle of 40-year-old Scotch. And so the Abuna at $90, right? At $80, $90. Okay, both of the Abunas are at that price range, more or less. Those whiskies are playing with the big guns, man. They're just an incredible whiskey, and I just want to shout out Graham Cruikshank, who's our master distiller. You know, all of the gang at Aberlour, you know, everybody that works there. The town, it's a tiny, tiny wee town, but to know that such an incredible piece of just art, you could say, has come out of that tiny, tiny little town in Scotland is so impressive. You know, it's so impressive, and it's just an amazing whiskey.
I mean, this entire lineup is incredible, and to finish on this is just like, wow. It is really, it's one of those whiskeys that just makes me like sit here and be like, man, I need to, like, after we're done with this, I'm gonna go and like sit down for like 20 minutes and just enjoy this pour and kind of just like take it in. It's so, you know,
good. It's like you say, it's the best finisher, man. It's the best move. It's the best move to go to. When anyone ever says, have you got something that's going to blow my way? Have you got something that's going to impress me? Have you got something that's going to shock me? Have you got something that's going to change the way that I look at Scotch? either the Abuna Alba or the Abuna. These are the only answers for me. You know, they're the only answers for me.
Totally agree with that. I mean, oh man, I can't. There's nothing more I can really say about it. It's that.
Yeah, it does have that feeling. You know, a lot of people in tastings and things like that, when I talk about the 12 and the 16 and or even the 18, they'll talk to me about, you know, flavors and you know, they'll talk about an experience that they had, or like a sweet or a candy or something. When I ask people to describe this one to me, they often take a drink of it and they just go, "Oh my God, man! Oh my God!" You know, "Oh my God, man!" And I'm like, "Look, that's that. If that's your reaction, as long as it's a good 'oh my God,' I don't care. That's what we're going to put in the tasting notes. The tasting notes are just going to say, 'Oh my God.'"
I think it's worthy of that. But it is just a really, if I was gonna describe it in one word, I would just say rich. It is just a rich whiskey. It's got everything you'd want from it. Amazing nose, such a mouth-coating, oily mouthfeel, explosion of flavors, and then like the finish here, I haven't had a sip of it in a while, and it's just kind of lingering on the back of my tongue, and kind of like
it's going to stay there.
You just have
that.
You're
going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to be like, "Is that the Abuna?"
Yeah, it's like that chocolate and that cherry just kind of like hanging out, just having a little party.
You know, and we spoke about this already, but the fact that you can finish with this whiskey, the fact that you can finish a tasting on the Abuna, people leave tastings and that's their kind of lingering memory of Aberlour. You know, that incredible flavor, the intensity, the richness, like you say, that just that complete viscous, like beautiful syrupy sweetness, you know, that you get. And man, for $80 a bottle, you know, it's a no-brainer.
It's definitely tough. That's tough to beat. So good, and what an incredible lineup. So to close things out here, Callum, just thank you so much for coming on and doing this.
You're the man. You're the man.
No,
thank
this time,
everybody that watch, and you know, thank you to everybody that was asking questions and comments. But dude, you're the man. Thank you so much. Obviously,
thank you.
Fights, back in December, we did the Sunday night fights, which was incredible. It was so much fun. And just another shout out to obviously Key in the Lake.
Yes.
And to you both that do Sunday night fights, man. It's such a special opportunity. And these things for us at Aberlour, man, it's our pleasure to be here, like chatting to you. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for putting up with me.
No, this has been great. The whiskey is fantastic. I mean, and we talked about Robert Burns. Everyone that's watched tonight, and if you're watching this on the repost tomorrow, check the guy out. I mean, such a phenomenal life that he lived, and he's contributed so much to the world that, you know, here we are talking about him in 2021, and he died in 1796. So that says it right there. Like, check the guy out. Check out Aberlour. Buy their whiskey. You know, you will not be disappointed. You will not be disappointed if this is your first introduction into Scotch, especially. So again, Callum, thank you so much. When you're back in Chicago, let's get, hopefully, I don't know, maybe we can get back together.
I'm sure that there's a Key in the Lake episode coming up with us, with the two of us, where we're both going to feature. So, but man, great to see you again, and shout out to everybody in Chicago. Shout out to everybody across the US that watched, and thank you so much, mate, and hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, my man. Bye-bye.
Yeah, cheers. Take care. All right, everybody, thank you very much for watching this edition of the Urban Bourbon Hour with Callum O'Donnell, brand specialist from Aberlour Distillery in Scotland. What a really great lineup of whiskey they have. You know, we started with the 12 year, we went to 16, we went to the Abuna Alba, which is their single malt aged only in bourbon casks, and we finished with just a mind-blowing whiskey, which is the Aberlour Abuna, finished in just Oloroso sherry and at cask strength, 123 proof. I'd never think that it was 123 proof. Just a wonderful whiskey, the entire lineup. So check them out. Again, thanks to Callum. Thanks to all of you for watching. Check out this very interesting and cool individual, Robert Burns. And until next time, guys, cheers.